What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. I'm Isaiah, and I would like to invite you today to pull up a chair, a snack, and a beverage, and let me talk at you for a minute. Today, I'd like to talk at you about Cursebreaker, which is a new game from Sean Sutter and Metal King Studios, still set in the Relic Blade universe. This is meant more as a solo kind of co-op game, but it still takes place in that world. The focus of the game being on your wizard, your individual single wizard, and the things that it can do. And it's got a really, really interesting system that we're going to get to in a few minutes. So the book opens with about 5 to 8 pages of lore and backstory. I'm not going to get into all that here, but it is an interesting read. It's well written. And then we go into the things we need, which are tape measure D6s for this game, a 2x2, a model for your magician, lore books, which you can, if you buy the starter that comes with the cards for those, I'm sure you can buy them individually or buy them as a PDF and print them out yourself, or you can just look at the back of the book and write it down on a piece of paper. Whatever works for you. Enemy miniatures, cursed objects, which are your objectives, but the objectives have a role to play here. Health counters, every wizard has 10 health. When it's reduced to 0, you're done. Status tokens to represent bind, daze, hate, and term. And again, if you get the starter box, it comes with those things. It comes with everything you need except terrain, a board, a tape measure, and models. And then, of course, you need terrain. To get the game going, you got to pick your model, who's going to be your wizard, and then you pick, the example says 2, so we're going to go with 2 lore books, and then you have 5 power dice to divide between those books. It's good to have different colors here, just make sure you keep them separate because what you designate now will be in place in perpetuity. And then you need models to represent any followers, enemies, or persistent spells that you have, spells that stay on the board. So if you've got those Sigmar endless spells just sitting around like I do, we're going to find a purpose for those things and maybe an excuse to get some of them built and painted. We then come to the board, which is a 2x2, and each scenario gives a description of where in the world and where on the map it takes place, so that if you would like to try to recreate those biomes on your table, you have the information you need to do so. I, of course, will be doing my best to do that very thing. And then you proceed into gameplay, which is broken into 3 phases: the power phase, the curse phase, and the cleanse phase. We then come into the core rules. So some basic things about your magician as well as some things that I got wrong earlier. You can choose any number of lore books except prohibited or forbidden lore. You have to actually unlock those lore books in campaign play to be able to use them, which I think is cool. As mentioned, you have 10 health, which we call endurance, 5 power dice, and a speed of 5. When it activates, you can move any directions up to 5, but you cannot move through other characters. You start with the 5 power dice, and you assign those to your lore books. Once we have our models selected and figured out, we want to set up our terrain again. If you want to try to match the biome, that's up to you. But I think that it's a good idea for making the game a lot more immersive. Scenarios will tell you where to deploy, and we determine initiative before deployment and deploy in initiative order. Cursed objects, we're going to talk about more in the curse phase. I will mention, though, that when a cursed item is depleted, it breaks and leaves a treasure token on the board. And then we're going to start with the power phase. We're set up, we've got a table, we've got terrain. Both parties know the effects of those terrains. We've got our cursed object / objective set up, and we're ready to start moving toy soldiers and rolling dice. First step of the power phase is to roll your power dice, and then between your books of lore, assign dice to each book. Those numbers on those dice will correspond to spells on the lore book card. Those are the spells that you have access to that turn. Initiative is determined by whoever has the fewest power dice. And if you have the same number, the player who rolled the most ones has initiative. Further ties are broken by 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, etc. Player with initiative activates their magician first. It is not a may choose to go first. It is the person with initiative activates first. Then we roll our curse dice. So each cursed object will have an assigned number of power dice given by the scenario. You roll those as D3s. Then we start activating magicians. When you activate, you can move and may cast 2 spells. And you can do those things in any order. You just can't break the movement up. Like you can't move 3 and then cast a spell and move 2. You got to move your whole 5. But you could do move, cast, cast. You could do cast, cast, move. You could do cast, move, cast. Whatever works best for you. Then you go to the champion phase, which is where if you have followers, they will activate. When casting a spell, there is no roll. You choose the power dice you're going to use, and then you cast the associated spell, the one, whatever the number that is on the card. Once the spell is cast, those dice are considered spent and are moved to an inactive pool. Spent dice cannot be interacted with in any way, shape, or form. However, your unspent power dice can be tampered with, both for your benefit as well as for your downfall. So when you're rolling, dice rolls of a 1 are shifting power dice, and they may be spent to either harvest other shifting power dice, which are dices of 1, from other magicians or cursed objects that are within 6 inches, or you can cast an arcane bolt, which is a range 6, damage 1 spell. You may use an arcane bolt without a target to simply get the shifting dice out of there so that someone can't take it. So it seems like playing those ones, dealing with those early in your activations, is going to be a good thing. Then on the opposite side of the dice from the 1, we have the 6, which is an overpowered dice, which can be used for 2 things. It can be used to overpower a spell, in which case you just spend it, declare what you're doing, and then you activate the overpower line on the spell. The other option is to overpower yourself, in which you give yourself 1 more endurance from where you're at. Once all wizards and followers have been activated, the game moves to the curse phase. So those D3s we rolled for the cursed objects, it's time for them to do their dirty work. Now a 1 there is still a shifting dice. A 2 on the D3 is a curse. A 3 on the D3 is a summon. The curse is whatever spell is attached to that cursed object, and the summon will bring forth some atrocious enemy from the ether. Those abyssal fiends have 3 stats: speed, fight, endurance, which are listed in that order on their stat line. Speed is how far they can move. Fight is the damage that they can deal to an enemy within 1 inch horizontally and 2 inches vertically. And endurance is how much damage that creature can take before it is kaput. Creatures that are set up at the start of the scenario and those summoned by cursed objects are considered friendly to one another. Also, creatures that a magician summons are considered friendly to that magician, their champions, and any other creatures they have summoned. But unless otherwise stated, creatures that are not explicitly friendly are enemies. Spells, however, there are some spells that can change a creature's alignment, so they can make them flop sides. Double agent, and we didn't even know it. So when creatures move, even if they're friendly, we don't really get to control where they move, but we can control the order they move in. So we activate all friendly creatures first, then all enemies. And they're always going to move their speed in a straight line directly towards the nearest enemy. Regardless of dangerous or difficult terrain, even if it is to their detriment, they are going to hoof through it. Now, if a model is blocking their path, they will move the next shortest route to get around said model. So, fights are all resolved one at a time when they occur. Now, the fight step is a little bit odd to me, considering that you don't roll any dice. You just choose a target within an inch side to side or 2 inches vertically, and you apply your fight stat as damage to that model. Very streamlined. We'll see how it feels when we get to the table. And then finally, we come to the cleanse phase, where we're going to reduce both term and hate, which think of them as having timers. They start with, so for example, hate 3 or term 3. Each cleanse phase, that is reduced by 1. If it's a term, that's usually going to be applied to like a summon or something like that. At that point, when that term runs out, it dissipates back into the ether. Any shifting dice that you have unspent are sucked into the nearest cursed object. And then we dedicate any new shifting dice that you stole, that you got. We assign those a color corresponding to one of our lore books. If there are no cursed objects, the shifting dice move to the nearest magician instead. Each scenario will define the victory conditions for that scenario, and if those conditions have been met at the end of the cleanse phase, then the game ends and a victor is declared. In the case of a draw, whoever has the most power dice when the game ends is the winner. We then come into our rules for terrain and some examples of some different terrain setups. We start with blocking area, which blocks line of sight to characters touching or behind the terrain piece. Characters completely in it can draw line of sight out. Other people can't draw line of sight in. Blocking through terrain only blocks line of sight to characters standing behind the terrain piece. Climbable is self-explanatory. Dangerous X deals damage to characters when they move through it. Fragile X means that the piece can potentially be destroyed, resulting in a crash. We have movable pieces that can be moved by spells, and rough pieces, which will affect your move value. And then we have some examples like the Necromancer's Gallows, the Basilisk Graveyard, and the Assassin's Lair. Now again, going back to touch again on what I mentioned earlier about creating the biomes and the fact that while that is a lot of fun, it is not absolutely necessary. So if you don't have a large terrain collection, the book does give you some minimum. So you want at least 6 ruined walls, 3 rubble piles, and 3 precarious columns are the recommended pieces. We then move into the magic lore, which opens describing the various traits of spells such as range, what they target, line of sight, the damage they deal, whether or not they have an area of effect, they're a summon or modify their speed, fight, or endurance in some way, their spell terrain, or if you're targeted, spell terrain. So that would be if you have like a wall of flames. It would add a terrain feature as well as do what it does. Term, which is the specific amount of time that it stays into play and how far it moves. Bind, which is similar to term in that it has a countdown, but it prevents you from moving. Each time your move is skipped, it comes down. But I think you can still cast spells. Then we have daze, which stops you from fighting. Each time you skip a fight phase, that counter is reduced. Hate means that you consider all other models as enemies. A little mind control action. You're just overpowered by the red thirst. So there are 8 books of lore. The Book of Burning, the Book of Oceans, the Book of Storms, the Book of Mountains, the Book of Nature, the Book of Dreams, the Book of Justice, and the Book of Darkness, each with 6 spells. 4 spells, and then shifting power and overpower. Then we have the forbidden lores. These are the ones that you would have to unlock through campaign play. We have the Book of Agog, the Book of Heaven, and then we go into the campaign system. So there are 2 sets of campaign structure. One for if you're playing with or against others, and one for playing solo. Both use a victory through achievement. So there's this long list of things. Enter the Waste, Ecstasy of Power, Indestructible. There's a chunk of them that you need to keep up with as you play. I highly would recommend printing out or writing them down on a piece of paper and just keeping that with your character sheet, but not on the back of your character sheet, because then it's out of sight, out of mind, and I feel like that will create problems, at least for me, with actually remembering when I do one of those things. You have a caravan, which is where you keep all your lore books and followers and stuff. If you are in possession of forbidden lore, you are required to bring that lore book. That's also where you're going to choose any treasures or loots or special things that you have and want to bring, and where your champion followers hang out. There are 3 types, 4 maybe? 3 types of champions. There's the fighter champion, the scout champion, and the rogue champion. And then we have our achievements. Every 3 achievements, is that correct? You gain 1 additional power dice for every 3 achievements that you unlock. And then whoever collects the most achievements over the course of your campaign, however long you want that to be, will be declared the victor of that campaign. I will be playing this as a solo campaign, so there are a few things that work a little bit different there. And these are all in addition to what you would normally do. So first change is that during the fight phase, you go back and forth between alternating friendly and enemy fights one at a time. You are also pursued by Shadow. The Shadow is a basically nemesis type creature because you're not playing against another person, so it's something that is pursuing you through the waste. Now, should you be reduced to 0 endurance, the Shadow will take over your body and wear your skin, and you'll just go do stuff. You'll wake up days later in the wastes, lose a random treasure, and all of your champion followers. Each time the Shadow happens, it takes longer to come back to your body and retake control of yourself. And you also lose more treasures each time that it happens. To win the solo campaign, you still are looking to complete achievements and gain achievement points. The campaign has different endings based on how many achievements you complete, which I think is really, really, really cool because it gives you a little bit more replayability, as it were. So the Mocking Shadow is this nemesis that follows you. It starts the game with 5 power dice and 2 specific books of lore, the Book of Shadows and the Book of Mockery. It does not have endurance or speed traits. It never dies, and it is always directly behind your magician's own head. It regards the scenario creatures as friendly. The Shade's power dice are allocated 3 dice to the Book of Shadows and 2 dice to the Book of Mockery. Initiative is determined between the player and the Shade, and if the Shade gets new power dice, they are assigned to the book with the fewest dice. If they have the same number of dice, then you give it to the Book of Shadows. When the Shade activates, it will start by spending shifting power dice against the player. It does not harvest dice from cursed objects, and it never loses unspent shifting power dice. It will always overpower the first spell it casts if it can, but it cannot overpower itself. And it will cast spells in the order of the highest value down. Then we come into the endings of the campaign, which I'm not going to read right now. I'm just going to say that there are 3 separate endings, one for 0 to 5 achievements, one for 6 to 10 achievements, and one for 11 or more achievements. And then we have some absolutely amazing model photography, which is standard for Sean's books. And then we have our scenarios, of which there are 10. the Mud Fields, the Assassin's Lair, the Basilisk Graveyard, the Forest of Torment, the Magister's Vault, the Necromancer's Gallows, the Akkadian Ziggurat, the Bloodstained Arena, the Crusader Catacombs, the Lost Temple of Agog, and the Empyrean Palace. And again, I am going to do my very, very best to create those environments on the table as I play through those scenarios to the very, very best of my ability and collection. Then we have the campaign conclusions for regular play, an appendix, and the Cursebreaker tokens. We also have copies of the cards that you can photocopy or whatever you need to do, as well as the roster, but the roster I'm sure is available online as a PDF. So the box set with the book and the tokens and all the things and the cards is $40. If you already have Relic Blade models, it's perfect and really affordable. While you don't have to use the amazing models that Sean makes, if you've already got a collection of models, you could use those. I like Sean's models and I already have them, so I will definitely be using those. Plus, if you have the Catacombs, I think it is, starter box, it comes with 2 wizards, 2 rogues, 2 scouts. So you've already got what you need. You would just need to supplement monsters. Now, monsters, I will almost certainly be supplementing other things for my collection, and that's okay. The game police aren't going to show up and tell me how to have fun with my toys. If they do, I'll tell them to get the heck off my property quickly before I respond with extreme prejudice. Anyways, I think Cursebreaker is going to be a lot of fun. I am slightly skeptical about the lack of dice rolling in the fighting, but we'll see. Again, this is just me reading through the book, sharing my thoughts and what the book has in it. So I could get it on the table and it could just be super smooth, super quick, super fun to where you can just get a lot of games in really fast, or it might take something away. I won't know until I get it on the table. But for $40 for the tokens and everything, it's a no-brainer, especially considering that it has built-in solo play, which is always a plus for me here at World of Wargaming. And that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for everything, for clicking buttons, for leaving comments, for checking out links and descriptions, for just clicking the video and watching a little bit of it. Even bigger thanks if you watched all of it at this point where I'm talking to you. All of it helps, and I'm incredibly grateful for all of it. Thank you so much for letting me talk at you for a little bit. I hope you have an absolutely amazing rest of your day.